Are you spending money before you have earned it? Welcome to Crap Now What? This is a podcast that is designed to discuss real life examples of how money and emotions are often tied together. The spirit of this podcast is to have you be as informed as possible of some of life's hiccups. Now, in today's episode, we're going to have a little bit of a twist. Usually, I bring these to you purely from a financial standpoint, as my position is to be an untaxable retirement or an untaxable wealth strategist. And so I'm often talking about tips on how to increase how much money you're going to have in retirement. This one's going to take a little bit of a different twist to it. And I want to preface this. I am part of the financial services world. I have several credentials within the financial services world. However, I am not an expert on every aspect of financial services. I'm also not an attorney. I'm definitely not a psychologist. And many of the concepts that I share with you are purely observations that I've made in life that I think that you might enjoy. If this is your first podcast, the first time that you've joined me, you're going to hopefully find that this is an interesting take on life. If you're one of my regular followers, welcome back, because we're going to have a little bit of a different twist, as I indicated. Now, today's podcast is coming from a unique angle. I am an avid reader. I like to always have a book in my possession at any time, just in case I have a little extra downtime. And I find it to be slightly more stimulating than to getting into my social media accounts to have a story or a book that I'm following. And in this case, I just finished a John Grisham book called King of Torts. And in this particular book, if you're familiar with anything, and I said I'm not an attorney, I'm not from the legal services world, but I do like stories like this that interweave amongst itself. And I was inspired by this because this particular attorney was one that fell into a world of being a specialist with the world of mass settlements, class action lawsuits. And of course, just like most books, we've got several different characters along the way. I was intrigued by the length that it takes, the steps that it takes to actually settle a class action lawsuit, and the fact and how it impacts many of the people that have been in a class action lawsuit. And many of us are familiar with seeing ads where it says, did you go through XYZ? Were you exposed to XYZ? And then that's how new people are found to be a part of the class action lawsuit. However, I opened up this show by asking if you've ever been spending money that you've not had yet, not received yet. And that's the spirit of this, is how this class action lawsuit process got people excited about getting a big windfall. And it took years and years and years. Then the courts did not provide the large sum. And then, of course, the attorneys took their cut. And so this was an impact. And where I'm coming from on this is that I don't really want to belabor that specific point, but it got me to thinking about all the different ways we as humans have an opportunity to earn a windfall, who have some big money coming in, and have a propensity to spending it before we've got it. So that is our Crap Now What? And we're going to talk a little bit more about the different ways that these types of windfalls will impact people, how it can impact your finances in the future. So in this case, our focus is talking about people in everyday life situations. Not everybody's going to go through a class action lawsuit, although that is one of the areas. Not everybody, hopefully, is going to be exposed to a situation where there is some sort of personal injury or some of the other areas where there's a sudden windfall. Now, most people would love to win the lottery, but there are a lot of people in sales or professional positions where, in the case of like that attorney in this book, would be earning a big commission. People that potentially earn commissions off of the sale of some other type of and being a part of another sales position. And then, of course, in this category, inheritances, the expectation that there's going to be an inheritance and those funds coming into the household. And where this is actually especially relevant is that, and I've mentioned this before, most people are living paycheck to paycheck in their households. I even found some statistics on what percentage of celebrities feel like they live paycheck to paycheck. We have a propensity overall, without the idea of these windfalls coming in, we have a propensity overall that 83% of us feel like we're overspending. Any of the surveys and different looks out there. We've mentioned these types of statistics before on this platform, on this podcast. What is amazing and what you may not be familiar with, back to the spirit of being informed rather than uninformed, if a person is in a personal injury situation, it usually takes at least a year for that settlement. And I've met people over the years, and again, this is part of the spirit of why this really intrigued me, having many years in retail, having been around people that have plans to do some financial planning. They're excited, they're foreseeing this type of money coming through, people that are going out and shopping for trinkets, perhaps looking at purchasing a home. It happens over and over and over again. We start to see these dollars coming through, and we're getting kind of thoughtful, mindful of how we want to spend it when it does come through. So we're going to dive into this and continue to dive into this a little bit further. So I mentioned the class actions, and these are statistics I found online as well. That's at least a 2 or 3 year settlement time frame. And like I said, there's a lot of pitfalls along those ways. But let's look at some other humans that there's a bigger pool. As you know, we're in football season. We know that athletes often get really big contracts. And there are some pretty scary statistics about how many athletes after they have retired are broke. And it's not an unfamiliar concept to most people who are listening to this, but it's 80%. And it's not just poor money management. I'm going to throw it out there. We have such an emotional relationship with our money that it's natural to want to spend it, natural to get excited about it, and maybe be a little bit short-sighted as to what the future can bring. And that does not pertain just to athletes. As you can see, I've got kind of a whole class of people here that are humans, and a whole host of examples. Musicians, looking at some of the statistics online, 48.6% of the musicians don't see themselves as having money. It's not an everyday thing for everybody in the music world to have money. 66% live paycheck to paycheck. Lottery winners, 70% of the lottery winners are broke within years of the money that they've earned and that they've won. I also read a very interesting statistic about entertainers, celebrities. The average actor, and this is where we get jaded or exposed to all the biggest and bests in the world. Anything we see on TV, anything that we're seeing and listening to on social media does not, that fraction does not represent the whole pool. And so when we're seeing the big houses and the fancy cars and everything, that does not pertain to everyone. And it's the same way with anyone, no matter how you compare them to other people. $77,000 a year is the average earnings of an actor. Now, of course, this is going across all fields of acting, but it still is eye-opening as to how easy it is for humans, no matter what your background is, no matter what your field or your profession is, to get a little bit off course and start spending it before it's earned. And that can be very dangerous, because if a person decides that they want, and they're starting to think about how they're going to spend their windfall, how they're going to allocate the money that is not coming in yet. There's no actual date. In some cases, there's no actual date as to when that money is going to be coming in. And down payment is made on a house, or somebody signs up for a car payment that's bigger than what they've been prepared and able to pay on a regular budget, and the monies are delayed, especially indefinitely. It's always shocking to people, or at least I should say always. I would say 8 out of 10, maybe even 9 out of 10 of the people that I've ever talked to in any platform, even in financial services, when they start to talk about, okay, Shaunelle, I'm going to get this money and I'm going to want to have it untaxed as much as possible. What will I be able to do? And it's years, months to years before they're actually able to get their hands on that money. And that means it's not a bad thing to plan ahead. Please take it in the context of, though, we're talking about human nature, to start spending it and start making those plans. And then it gets sometimes, for many people, discouraging that those dollars aren't in. So what's the spirit of all this? I took a deeper dive into this. And a lot of it has to do with the desire to live the American dream. And so as I started to go through this and take it a little bit further than just the top line of our desire to spend money before we have it, our excitement is to look at it from the idea of the American dream. Because many people that I work with, we're all immigrants on some level, or some level of generation of immigrants on some level. Some of us on a longer tree, so to speak, coming from Europe or some of the other places in the world that people immigrate from or have immigrated to America from. And some people, I've met people who are first and second generation immigrants that are looking to have the best path possible. But the commonality is that the American dream is tied to, and I've got several places where I've got some resources on this, including an article in Forbes.com, on Forbes.com, and also an interesting one. I cite Investopedia a lot on this podcast because it is very financial service based. It's also very similar to Wikipedia, except it takes the financial terms and pulls articles together and details together. And in both cases, the initial American dream was tied to the idea of prosperity. And in many cases, the prosperity is being measured as owning a home and having education, and or having education. It does tend to trickle on past that wealth also gets into this, from the idea of having the wealth to support the home as well as having the wealth to support the education. But there's a lot to do too with the entrepreneurial spirit and the number of people that would like to have their own business, to have some level of financial freedom. And so the American dream is the underlying desire to feel comfortable. Feel comfortable no matter how you end up measuring it. And if you juxtaposition this with the fact that 83% of the households already are admitting that they feel like they're overspending. We've also used a statistic before about how many and what large percentage of those that make $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. That's where some of the desire and the excitement that some of these other areas of windfall, so to speak, if you just kind of bundle them up under one term, end up helping to boost that American dream. And when we also talk about American dream and these windfalls, is that we're also talking about people's emotions. And again, taking a little bit deeper dive into this article on Forbes, is the idea that when these windfalls are coming in, not only are we ready to spend it, but it's also in some, and in a large part, the first reaction is, oh, finally I'm going to be able to breathe. Finally, I'm going to be able to live comfortably. Maybe not instantaneously rich as far as like an athlete might be, or somebody getting the lottery and instant millions, but even moderate amounts, like I mentioned, commissions for a salesperson, maybe an extra large commission coming through. That idea of being able to live and live a little bit more comfortably starts to eliminate some of the stress. And again, that's part of the spirit of this Crap Now What podcast, and part of the reason why I like to share these concepts, because here we've now potentially eliminated anxiety. Now we're starting to feel comfortable. I'm kind of putting myself into those shoes and saying and then the money doesn't come, and maybe we've already started to spend it. Here is how people's emotions are tied to their money. Many of us know that we should have a budget to make sure that we have the money to pay our bills. But many of us maybe start a budget and don't use it and implement it. And there's another large portion that talk about having one, but don't ever really do it. The same is the case, and again, this is in that same article that I was talking about on Forbes, with the number of people who know they really should have some level of a financial advisor, and they just don't get around to it because it's seen as work, things that are difficult to do, something that's going to be time consuming. It's going to be a pain in the neck to pull all the paperwork together and to go through the process. Other emotions that are tied to money. There is a natural tendency for people to spend their money with exuberance, to be able to enjoy it even on a day-to-day basis, whether it's buying a little bit nicer car than initially planned, maybe buying an extra nice accessory, nice shoes, a handbag, jewelry. You can name a lot of different things. Well, even house shopping, we've talked about that. It's very easy to get into a position where we go ahead and just say, yeah, I'll take it on, get a little bit more house than I originally planned because I don't want to give up on certain things. So we have a tendency to buy with exuberance, and in some cases, recklessness. So the emotions play a huge role. The anxiety, and in some cases, the avoidance of a vicious cycle. And we're not going to get into this today because I think there's enough facts and discussion points, at least, even if they're not solid facts, enough discussion points. We don't have to talk about necessarily what our family history plays into it, but it definitely is something that can't be ignored. We're getting close to wrapping this up. I'm going to share with you a couple more things. According to, and let's talk about the American dream, because the American dream, as many of you have seen, and there's probably more than countless, more than dozens, probably hundreds, maybe even thousands. There's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of people writing articles about how the American dream has changed. Not necessarily just coming off of the pandemic, but also the impact of social media on the American dream. There are a lot of places and a lot of people, and I've heard other podcasts even talking about how easy it is just to order something through an app. How easy it is to see a social influencer with something that looks bright and shiny and new. And it might be practical, but it also makes it so much easier to get into money challenges. But it also means, too, that is an impact on the American dream. I want to look like this person. I would like to have less dark circles under my eyes and less wrinkles on my face. And I would love to have that cute dress, or look at that fun Halloween costume for the dog. The influencers in this picture of what the American dream is also puts and adds to the anxiety. It puts to the level of desire. And that again goes back to my original premise, the idea that most people spend money before they have it. And that is especially true in situations where big dollars are coming in unexpectedly or semi-expectedly. As a matter of fact, 54% of the young people have indicated in studies that were posted both on neuroscience.com and on the Atlantic.com, Atlantic Daily, that 54% of the young people would aspire to be a social influencer, let alone we're talking about the money or whatever they think comes along with it, but to rather be a social influencer than a doctor or a lawyer or something else that's a little bit more traditional. And these articles go on to talk about how mortified in some cases these parents were to see that this is how inspiring a social influencer is. But I'm tying it together with some of these other emotions and the emotions that come along with money. So what I would like you to do, I want you to dream. I want you to dream about what you would like your future to look like. Because if we don't have dreams, then we don't necessarily have aspirations. If we don't have aspirations, we don't have a vision of what we want our future to look like, of our personal future. And if you're a parent, the same for your children. The tendency is, though, to get to the stage that there are dreams, there are aspirations, there is a vision. And when we start to see that maybe it's going to come together, that what I'm going to encourage you to do is just don't try to make it happen so much that you make decisions that impact your today budget and possibly your future budget. If a purchase is made, especially at interest rates that are very high, if a purchase is made or a cramp is put on a budget based on a future amount of money, it's going to not only impact now, that middle, but it's also going to impact the way future dollars, because now we've, in a sense, kind of thrown away some money. And I don't want you to do that. Focus on making your life better, keeping that American dream live for yourself. Focus on, this is another one of my things I'm going to challenge you to do, is to work on helping to make people's lives better, not necessarily with money, but to give, to smile, to be pleasant, to aspire each day, to make a difference. And it doesn't always have to be with making a purchase. Plan for your future. I just alluded to that. And be educated. Continue to educate yourself. If you've been watching any of the socials where these are on, listening to this podcast, be educated as much as possible, because some of the differences in financing and some of the changes and some of the early decisions that are made, such as investing the money and not spending it all right away, can take advantage of compound interest. There's another very interesting article on Yahoo Finance where Charles Barkley was interviewed and talking about what happens with the athletes. And instead of buying, He said he made mistakes. He bought the $300,000 Bentley. He bought at one time he had 5 cars, and he was giving money to family because people do come out with their hands open. And I'm trying to think. One of the other players, he heard it actually the advice from several other people, but it was actually Julius Erving who came to him and said, dude, how many more cars can you drive at once? You have to plan for your future. Put some money away. Take advantage of compound interest. But that principle works for anybody. Making sure to make decisions to take advantage of compound interest, utilize a financial advisor, ask and reach out even to my team to find out how can you make a difference to untax your dollars so you can even earn more later, whether it's in retirement or whether it's more immediate. There are other ways to educate yourself rather than just the exact traditional way, but to take advantage of specialty programs, special opportunities that are a lot less risk, but can help you earn and enjoy more of your money. If you like these tips, of course, would love to have your input on what else you would like to discuss. Would love to hear from you on our team. There is also other places where you can look for any of our podcast episodes. We typically drop them every Monday, and they can be found on all platforms. There are also Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok accounts that are tied to Blazing Star. Our website is goblazingstar.com. I want to thank Excel Media, Caleb in particular, for being our producer, and for you as our audience and the clients, the many, many clients that I work with, to continue to inspire. And I hope you found this episode to be somewhat interesting just because it talks about human nature and helping you to enjoy more of your money now and into the future. You've got one life, and no matter whether you're working on your financial side, finances also are tied to emotions, physical, as well as mental. Have a great day. Okay, so if you're still listening to this podcast at this stage, this is the boring stuff. This is the disclaimer. And I'm doing this because, yes, I do care about who you are and what you do with your money. And I'm going to be here to help give you some ideas. However, these are just ideas. They're theories. Sometimes these are ideas that are coming into my head based on what's going on in the world at this time. And they're not necessarily specific financial advice. I do encourage you, if you decide to do anything with your money, make any changes, seek the advice of a professional. You're welcome to follow up with me or with someone else, and make sure that what you're doing is something that fits with you, your lifestyle, your finances, and it's a strategy that's specific to you. Again, these are ideas and concepts. Do not necessarily take these as specific financial advice and follow it directly without having a full education.